I was listening to an old video that I had in my collection. I had purchased the first lecture of the 3-lecture series on magnetic secrets by Paul Babcock. He gave it at the 2012 conference in Idaho, and I didn't attend that conference, but I bought the video and I re-downloaded it because I deserve to. I paid for it, and I was watching it and I got two things out of it. One thing I'll save for another video. It has to do with my sleep circuit, how to possibly boost the benefits of that sleep circuit. But another idea I got out of it just now, it's been bugging me about Mark Belanger's tanked water, in which he puts a pipeline. He's got tanked water on a hill, and he's got a pipeline running down the hill and then running back up, and he's got a pump at the bottom of the hill to pump the water back up to the tank. And he recycles the same water. It's chlorinated with, I don't know, some kind of natural antifreeze, and the top of the tank is, shut from outside debris and evaporation. And then he's got a battery powering a bunch of additional pumps that are strung out in line, all in series, along the pipeline running down the hill from the tank, okay? And they're turned around, and they're wired backwards to the battery. So the falling water, so they turn into generators, but they're all in series. And he says he gets no depletion of pressure no matter how many pumps he puts in line, wired, turned around. And nothing changes by the time the water gets down to the bottom pump that's wired and positioned forward to pump the water back up the hill. Nothing changes. The pressure doesn't change. The only factor that changes the pressure is the head, the height of the water, that determines the pressure. But the inline backward-oriented pumps do not change the pressure. So he can extract as much electrical energy as he wants, depending on how many pumps he can put in line, positioned and wired backwards. And the battery that powers the pump at the bottom, positioned and wired forwards, is the same battery as is connected to the pumps that are positioned and wired backwards. Only those pumps, I think he said he put inverters on them, and he puts a regulator valve at the top. Because what he does is he regulates the pressure. The potential head is what he has to work with, but then he regulates it. He takes and he makes the pressure just shy of bursting point, just shy of bursting the pipe. So he runs the pipe at maximum pressure that it's capable of handling. So here's this free energy device. And the only mystery is gravity and hydraulics. Okay, so now let's change the scheme a little and go back to Paul Babcock's first magnetic energy secret lecture. And one of the experiments he has, which is all over YouTube, you get a copper pipe and you pass a magnet down the copper pipe versus a plastic pipe of the same diameter. And the back EMF created by that magnet going down the copper pipe slows it down such that the same magnet passed through a plastic pipe reaches the bottom of that pipe much quicker. Now, magnetism is expressed in terms of two fields, or electromagnetism is expressed as two fields that are at right angles to each other. Called the right-hand rule. I never could learn it. I still didn't learn it. Whatever. I got the idea generally that it's 90 degrees from each other. So the electric field and the magnetic field are 90 degrees different in terms of their angle. But gravity is the square of the distance, which is another right angle. Okay? It's a planar, situation. It's not linear. Just like electromagnetism is not linear. Because we have voltage times amperage. That's not linear either. So I'm grappling in my brain. We've heard that gravity is like electromagnetism, but how is it different? Now, when Mark Boulanger does his thing, and when Paul Babcock explains his thing, he baffles people, physicists especially, and engineers, because they say, oh, it defies physics, it defies the second law of thermodynamics, equal energy in, equal energy out. He says, no, it doesn't. I didn't beat that law. I beat Lenz's law. And I beat one of Max Planck's theorems, which everybody says is a law, and says it's just as good as being a law. No, it's not, because it doesn't apply. They just take Lenz's law and puts a negative sign on it and makes it Maxwell Planck's or law or theorem. Well, in other words, there's a physical explanation. You don't have to invoke anything mysterious or X factor. I mean, Leon Ernest Eman called the energy he was dealing with the X factor. Well, it's easy. It's prana, and there are 5 qualities to prana, and one of them happens to be electricity, but there are 4 others that, that we don't give credit where credit is due. And that's been a basis for my line of reasoning all along, that there's usually a physical explanation for everything if we only gave credit where credit was due, instead of ignoring, okay? Walking around in denial. Well, so Paul Babcock put me back on that track of thinking, don't think mysterious, think there's an explanation for it, just stop denying it, Okay. What is gravity if it's similar to electromagnetism? If you can make rocks, stones float, make them levitate, then what is it? Edward Leedskalnin apparently made stones float. So what is it? What is gravity such that electromagnetism has anything to do with it, much less or much more than just be an analogy, but actually be convertible between the two, using some technical set of details that we don't understand? I believe I figured it out. Let me compose myself here. Mendeleyev, if I can say his name right. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce it in the Russian. Mendeleyev. Mendeleyev, whatever it is. I'll have to hear a Russian pronounce it. The guy who gave us the atomic periodic chart, the atomic elements. 2 elements are left out of it. And he's guilty of leaving them out because he didn't think we would accept it. And quite frankly, he wasn't sure at the time. But later on he became more sure, and then we don't get his revised version. We're stuck with the original version because it's not easy for us to accept the upgraded version. 2 elements he knew about, lighter than hydrogen, but he left them out originally because he wasn't certain about it. Well, it turns out that one of those 2, I think it's the heavier of the 2, he calls them X and Y, is more prominent than the lighter one. Now, Charlie Lutz used to talk about matter and antimatter, that when the Kundalini awakens the crown chakra and a person becomes fully enlightened, the Kundalini is the earth energy, the earth prana, that rises up the spine. It's sitting there, a sleeping serpent, and it rises up the spine, opens up all the chakras, and creates an imbalance. And this is why the process of becoming enlightened is so uncouth, because for a certain length of time you have to put up with an imbalance and accept it in order to allow the antimatter, the anti-prana, to come down from above. It circulates in the opposite direction. It's a cooling prana as opposed to the Kundalini rising up the spine, which is a heating prana. And they create balance, and they circulate. They create a circle, like 2 snakes chasing each other's tails, a hot snake and a cold snake. The hot snake is the Kundalini we're familiar with. It rises up the spine, and the cooling snake goes down the spine. And of course, Maharishi talks about the opening up of the Kundalini, the Ida and the Pingala and the Sushumna. When the Ida and Pingala are balanced, the Sushumna can rise up the spine and give us full use of all the chakras. So there are two different explanations there of a circulatory hot and cold, two different types of energies, hot and cold, that have to be in balance. And the body maintains that balance. So Charlie Lutz talked about this antimatter, and we have the idea of a hollow planet. Suns, stars, they're hollow. And we have this fiction of gravity. And now I've figured it out. I knew that looking at that movie called Tornado with Helen Hunt and Paul Paxton, Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. And they have a short segment in the middle of that movie that I excerpted, and I put it on the internet. It's at earthinglife.info. And it's a very short little excerpt that's looking directly up from the inside of a tornado. And it was CGI, of course. And they have a tornado, they depict that tornado from the inside view. See, they're at the bottom, not being sucked up because they're tied up to a water pipe that goes down to a water pump, a water well, 30 feet down below. And so they're tethered to this pipe, and their feet are pointing up in the air, And so the inside of this tornado is depicted as being hollow. But at the very center is a mini tornado, a little wispy thing going around on the inside. And it stays there. And that gave me the idea that, the Earth is hollow, and the Sun is a planet, and it's hollow. The photosphere is just two layers of neon and silicon plasma that give, and lightning bolts rise up from the surface, because the surface is iron calcium ferrite, or it's calcium ferrite. They rise up from the surface, and they keep the photosphere energized. And underneath every solar flare is this lightning bolt that is busy energizing the photosphere. And so it pushes out a little extra and creates the solar flare. But everything is hollow, and gravity is nothing more than a ball of antimatter at the center of this hollowness, causing the planet to take on a spheroidal shape and keeping it, or creating this phenomenon of gravity. Now, how come? Because of the fact that opposites attract. Okay? And it holds the planet together. Now we've got a little corollary problem here, a technical detail. Why doesn't the whole thing collapse if they're both attracting each other? Good point. So that's where the gyroscopic action comes in, the centrifugal force. So we have two. We have the centripetal. Because electricity, which is part of electromagnetism, spirals down a wire. That means that magnetic fields spiral as well, and we know this. How do we know this? I'm not sure. We'll skip that for the moment. But it has to, because it's at right angles to the electric fields. So magnetic fields spiral just like electric fields do, only 90 degrees off. And we know electric current spirals along a linear path. So, so we've got centripetal force of the magnetic force of attraction between matter and antimatter. But then we have this gyroscopic or centrifugal force balancing out the centripetal to prevent the matter from falling into the center of the antimatter core. So it goes into orbit, basically. The Earth is in orbit around its center, its antimatter core. And there's a hollow space between the two. So the Earth is a shell of matter in orbit around this hollow interior, the center of which is a sphere of its own, a mass of antimatter. Now, how can this be? Well, I'll tell you how. It's a sun, lighter than hydrogen. And it's the other element of Mendeleyev's periodic chart, which is lighter than matter, lighter than the, he called it X and Y, and as I recall, the X was the more, he should have called it Y and X, counting up from below. Well, alright, I can't remember which is which. But the one that he said was more common, that would not be it. It would be the one that's less common, because it only has to... Uh-oh. No, that's not right. No, the core of the Earth would have to be the one that's more common. That's the X. You know why? Because the primary solar rays exiting the sun form matter when they hit our atmosphere. So our Earth is actually accumulating matter. That means it's also accumulating out on from the inside influence, from the antimatter. See, we don't know how the ether manifests the process, but I bet it manifests as antimatter first, which wants to form a ball, which never can get up enough rotationary speed. For some reason, it prevents itself from spinning fast enough to fall apart. So it always forms these solid balls of energy. And its opposite is able to move about in order to go into orbit. In fact, it too readily moves around. So there's something about the antimatter that breaks itself, that causes its own breaking action, such that its ability to exhibit kinetic energy is very, very, very vastly reduced. It puts its own brakes upon itself, so that it never can go into orbit, so it has to form a ball, and thus we get creation the way that it operates. We get these balls of antimatter that are sluggish, they don't go into rotation very well, and then we get a debris field surrounding that ball made up of the opposite charge that is able to go into orbit sufficiently enough to cast itself out away and keep itself a certain distance away from the core, otherwise it would just collapse. So it's able to exhibit its energy in the form of kinetic motion much more readily than does antimatter. So matter is actually not primary, it's secondary. In fact, I wonder if antimatter is what Tesla called primary solar rays. So then where does, because there's two pre-hydrogen elements, where does this other one go? Wait a minute. Oh, he did say something else, Mendeleyev. They were different weights, and I bet they have different charges. So one exhibits an electric field. Oh, he said one does not exhibit, what was it, an electric field or a magnetic field? Oh, you know what? Oh my God. Matter exhibits both, doesn't it? Especially metal. But I bet these two do not, relativistically speaking. They exhibit more of one than the other. One exhibits more of an electric field, and the other exhibits more of a magnetic field. And thus they're able to coexist at the center. So they both make up the core. That's where they're located. That's why we don't find it. Mendeleyev theoretically predicted their existence, but we don't find them, except at the very core of a planet or a sun being a planet anyway. I mean, Jupiter could turn into a sun if it got bigger. We know this. All the astronomers keep saying it. So that tells you that the sun is a planet too. Hello. It's just that Jupiter's not big enough to become a sun. But the core of all these hollow spheroidal objects in space, such as the hub of a Milky Way galaxy or ellipsoidal galaxies, they're all got a core in the middle of the hollowness at the center. And both X and Y pre-hydrogen atomic elements are in the core. And they're interacting because one predominantly has an electric field and the other predominantly has a magnetic field. How does that explain their attraction to matter? Well, it's an electromagnetic phenomenon, obviously. And that would explain the square of the distance phenomenon. And why they're separate? Because it comes out of the fact that the X and the Y are specialized in that one specializes in electric fields production and the other specializes in magnetic field production. So we don't get a chance to measure voltage interacting with amperage. It's either one or the other, but not both. Did I say that right? Or a magnetic versus an electric? Well, but electric is amperage, come on. Isn't it? Or is it the other way around? The electric is the electrostatic, the voltage, and magnetic is the current. All right, a current always creates a magnetic field, right. So a magnetic field is current. It's the field of the current, while the electric field is the field of the voltage. See? It's real simple. But the field, oh, wait a minute. Uh-oh. The electric field and the magnetic field are the X and Y pre-atomic stuff. So not all of it is in the core of the planet. Some of it's out here. It's just that there's so much of it at the core and so little of it out here. Otherwise it would compete with what's in the core. But because of some other property, weight, the X and the Y are able to hang out at the center, but everything from hydrogen and above in atomic weight doesn't hang out at the center. So we do get a segregation based on weight, mass. So we've got mass, atomic mass, molar, mass, and we've got one of the two, either X or Y, predominantly creating an electric field or sensitive to an electric field, and the other one predominantly creating and sensitive to a magnetic field. And a magnetic field is the byproduct of current, and an electric field is a byproduct of voltage. So there you go, an explanation of gravity. It's slightly complicated, but it's in terms of Mendeleyev's two missing ingredients, and that explains gravity and a few other things. Because it is a little complicated, so several things get explained all at once. But it explains it, and why you can manipulate an electromagnetic field and get levitation. Hello. It's an electromagnetic property, but it's explainable in very physical terms. But it's because of Mendeleyev's two missing pre-hydrogen atomic elements that are the missing keys. And that's why the whole thing is not fallen together yet, and why we cannot figure out gravity. So there you go. Thank you, Paul Babcock, for giving me what I needed. And Mark Belanger, excuse me, both of you guys, for giving me what I needed. Two mysteries, magnetic mystery and hydraulic and gravity mystery. They explain each other. Why would hydraulics explain it, though? See, so Mark Belanger still goes unexplained. All right. But at least, okay, well, we got a little more work to do. Oh, yes. Oh, well, another day. And you know what the proof is? For why my explanation cannot be discredited or swept aside too readily? We've never proved that gravity exists between two objects, have we? It's merely a planetary phenomenon.
planets are involved, stellar objects. We haven't shown that gravity exists between me sitting here and the air molecules surrounding me, or another person sitting next to me. Is there gravity between us? That's never been proven. The only proof we have of gravity is when a stellar object such as planet Earth, when that's involved with other objects or other planets, but never with objects between objects themselves. So when we see space matter, it's spread out. It's spread out. It goes this way, that way. It's like you pour a dye, a dyed liquid into another liquid that has no dye, and it kind of goes whichever way it's going to go, whatever the flow is. There's nothing causing it to go one way more than another. It just kind of goes, whatever seemingly random. So there's nothing to discredit necessarily outright. To outright discredit my hypothesis of how to explain gravity. Now, I'd like to explain inertia, and then maybe we'll be able to explain the hydraulics behind Mark Boulanger's tanked water free energy over unity device. But until then, or UFOs for that matter, being able to stop on a dime or turn, right angle turns, doing 30,000 miles per hour or 90,000 miles per hour, that would be nice. But I haven't gotten that far yet.